Hi guys, it's Nicole with Precision Camera, and today I'm with Tony with Sony, and today we're going to be talking about the new A9III, Sony's best action camera. How are you, Tony?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I'm just going to dive in. So, Tony, what new technology did Sony add to the A9III?
That's a hard question to answer, believe it or not, just because it's been a lot. The Alpha 9 series has always been kind of one of the cameras that has kicked off brand new technology, and this one's kind of no different on there.
Nice.
So, it's a brand new 24.6 megapixel. It's up a whole 0.4 megapixels from its predecessor.
Watch out.
And it's a stack sensor, very similar to what the other Alpha 9 cameras are, but then we added this thing called global shutter. So that is the one thing that is probably the biggest leap in technology.
Okay, nice.
And of course we added AI autofocus, coming from like the Alpha 7R5, which was our first camera with that. We've loaded that in there, and then we've just kicked up the speed to keep up with pretty much everything.
Next question. Let's talk about the burst rates. How does that affect the autofocus?
So the camera will shoot up to 120 frames per second, which is insane.
That's insane.
And as you said, the autofocus, it's probably the first camera that keeps up at 120 frames per second.
Awesome.
So the camera does calculate autofocus and auto exposure 120 times per second, which keeps up with obviously 120 frames per second. And I've been shooting this camera for probably almost a couple months now, and shooting mostly just very small flying birds and things like that. Yeah. It keeps up. There's 30 miles an hour coming towards me, 120 frames per second. The camera is on top of it.
Wow.
So it's pretty amazing.
And then with the autofocus, what exactly has been updated?
So we've implemented the new AI autofocus, which I know a lot of people just think it's a learning focus system, and that, which isn't. It is, but it's not quite. It doesn't know how you shoot or adjust while you shoot. Right. But the advantage is it is subject recognition. So this particular camera in general can pick up a person almost, you can barely tell in the frame, but it recognizes that person. Wow. But, iFocus has been around for forever, right? Yeah. And that's one of the things we've come to love on the mirrorless technology. But a person has always have to look at you, to be able to see the face. They look away, and it'll usually still track, but with AI autofocus, it recognizes, it knows where your ear's at, where your nose is at, your arms, your legs, your whole body. So no matter what you're doing and how you're doing it, it's focused on you.
That's crazy.
I've done things with motocross with a helmet on there, and it's kind of weird to see a little. The eye autofocus is still working, but through a helmet, and it's
insane.
It's kind of weird, but again, twirling dancers, twirling anything, it always knows where the head is, and as soon as that dancer's around, it's on the eye. It's incredibly fast. Wow,
the new technology seems crazy.
It is completely cheating. No.
Yeah.
I've always been one, I'm a tech rep, and I tell people all the time, use the camera technology to your advantage. 100%. And this one, you can do that and let the camera do the work and concentrate on the creative aspect.
Work smarter, not harder.
Exactly.
That's what Sony wants to do.
Let the camera do the work, folks. And this one does it better than any camera I've ever touched before.
Yeah, it seems like it. Okay, so you did touch on the sensor a little bit, but how is the image quality?
How's the image quality? I mean, it's amazing. Sony's known for great image quality. Some people look at 24 megapixels and go, "Oh, is that enough for me?" But for what the camera's designed for, with sports and things like that, you're using really long lenses to be in the action. You don't need a ton of the cropping room that you get. And 24 megapixels, you can make a pretty good size print. Absolutely no problem. The low light capability is still pretty fantastic. ISO range up to 25,600, which is fairly standard at this point, and it's been looking great.
So if you want the best performance with low light, what do you recommend?
If you read the internet, you've probably heard of it. With global shutter, there is people are concerned that there may be a loss of dynamic range, a loss of ISO capability. Especially when the camera starts now at ISO 250, where most of them are at 100. And people are like, well, you know, what's
Right.
that doing to my dynamic range? And I will tell you, there is a slight loss compared to some, but it's very slight for what this camera is designed for. You know, for sports and even for filming and doing movies and that, it holds its own all the way around. I am not disappointed by any means.
That's good to hear. I'm obsessed with this new LCD screen. I've been craving this from Sony for years. So let's chat about that.
So with the new LCD screen, you know, in the past, cameras have either just kind of flipped out one way, which kind of limits you a little bit, especially if you're trying to do video, see yourself in that. Or some just did the video way and flipped out. Now we came out with the camera that you can do either or. And, you know, it's one of those things where I didn't realize how important it was until I was out. This would have been with the Alpha 7R5, but I was out shooting some landscapes on a tripod and really down low and shooting everything from vertical and wide. I could do it and still be able to see.
That's amazing.
And, that's where I kind of fell in love with the new screen style.
I'm obsessed. Sony heard you guys loud and clear.
Exactly, and that is
loud and clear.
That's one of the things Sony does absolutely amazing. They listen to the photographers out there. They're constantly asking, hey, what can we do better? Where can we go with it? And every rendition really shows it. But it's I want to bring up one other thing, just because it's not just the screen that's on there. It's slightly different ergonomics. Shutter button has moved ever so slightly to make it a little more comfortable. The grip's a little more round. Even the custom function buttons.
I know, it looks just way better. It looks more satisfying.
And it's probably the most comfortable camera I think I've ever held. So
for
I've been really, really happy with it.
Okay, so who's the target audience for the Alpha 9III?
The world.
Everyone.
Everyone.
You.
Yes, you. You know, it's built for speed. So, you know, sports is one of the main aspects of it. But one of the things wedding photographers are really going to kind of fall in love with this camera too. And it's just because I know a lot of wedding photographers that don't like a ton of megapixels when you're shooting 1,000 images per wedding.
You don't need it.
And it has some really advanced flash capabilities that you can do outdoors and that too. So
I was going to ask next, how well does the A9 III work with the flash photography?
So with flash, one thing with global shutter, one of the advantages of global shutter is basically there's no flash sync speed anymore. Where most cameras have a maximum flash sync speed of like 1/250th of a second, or you know, our Alpha 1 has the highest of all digital cameras at 1/400th of a second. There are times it doesn't always work. Then you go into high speed sync, but then your flash power gets negligible and you have to have the flash really, really close. You no longer have to do that. So global shutter, you can shoot up to 1/80,000th of a second. And yes, I said that correctly, with full power flash.
Okay.
So you can do things with this camera that's truly never been done with any digital camera for sure.
So this camera is really fast. Do you really need 120 frames per second?
Some people do, yes. And I know a lot of people, even just people I've been talking to so far, look at it and like, I don't need 120 frames per second. And that's true. 120 frames per second, it's crazy. You can set the camera up for however you want. You know, in continuous mode, you can set it as low as 5 frames per second, you know, 20, 30, up to 60 frames. For me, that 120 works as, you use it as a boost. So, so what Sony's kind of done is added a new custom function button on the front. And you can set the camera up into a really low, you know, but once if you're holding the button, you want to kick it up. So say 5 frames per second, and then 120, and then back to 5. You're just touching a little boost button there. And using it for when you need it.
So I was reading up on the specs, and I noticed Precapture. What is that exactly?
So the camera starts shooting before you press the shutter button. Well, kind of. So you can set the camera up to, as soon as you half push down the shutter release button, you can set it to start recording the buffer up to a second before you push the shutter button all the way down.
That's crazy.
So obviously when fast things are happening and you miss it, you don't always ahead of the game, you're usually a little behind. Doesn't matter what you do, you can see up to a full second behind once you press the whole shutter.
Wow.
So for me, I've been shooting, I think I mentioned a lot of birds, and they're pretty unpredictable in flight.
They're fast.
I can now get them full swing, and I'm way behind, but I'm still capturing everything up to the moment that they start flying away. And I've, let's just say, a lot more winning shots than I've ever had before.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you for sitting down and talking to me about it. I'm super excited personally. If you want more information about the camera, the link is down below. And if you want to pre-order yours today, the link is also down below.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, yeah. All right, bye.